So let me read a little bit about Reverend Dr. Theresa McReynolds. She spent the last 50 years of her life in the healing profession as a chiropractor, energy healer, wellness coach, crystal healer, spiritual counselor, ritual facilitator, and motivational speaker. How many lives have you had? She has dedicated her life to uplifting others. After many years of study, she was ordained a New Thought Christian minister in California at the home of Truth Spiritual Center. She then went on to study with several teachers in the goddess tradition and was initiated as a high priestess. Theresa has spent most of her life as an activist. She was one of the founding members of the Atlantic County Women's Center, now named Avansar, as well as the Rape Crisis Center. She was inducted into the Atlantic County Women's Hall of Fame in 2018 for social service and volunteerism. She is a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, gardener, farmer, a lover of this Mother Earth, and forever a student of the mysteries. So I'd like to invite Dr. Reverend Theresa to come on up.
Hi there. Hi. My sister's here in Florida. We went yesterday to Galway and to Atlantic City. The marches. It was really exciting. And the neat thing about Atlantic City was we went with an immigrant group called El Pueblo Unido, and they walked us all through the city to every spot where someone was taken. And we got to stop there and do a little prayer. Yeah, it was so, we walked all around the city, so it was really neat. But today I'm here to talk to you about woke. And you know, I remember just hearing this word. Democrats are woke, liberals are woke. It was always like this negative, horrible thing that we were, it was just terrible. And I kept thinking, but that doesn't feel like that to me. It feels like waking up, you know? What is it? The Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, said that woke was a virus, that and it was a war on merit. And he said we'll fight woke in every area, in the business, in religion, in the schools, in education. This is the state where woke came to die. So when I heard that, I thought, goodness, why are some people so angry about that word? You know, what could it possibly be that, I mean, to me, this word represents clean air, feeding hungry kids, people who fought for civil rights, the right to vote, you know, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, safe space, clean air, all of these things that I, as an individual, a moral individual, want to see happen in this world and see how this world will be. It's believing that immigrants have the right to be here and have the right to a good life and the liberty and justice for all and all those things that, you know, we know. But really today, my story is more about what wakes us up. What wakes us up? Each one in this room. What woke you up, you know? Sleeping Beauty was woke up with a kiss. Cinderella with a shoe. But, you know, and I remember being in high school during the civil rights movement. I didn't know anything that was going on with civil rights. All I knew was that my boyfriend Bobby was cheating on me with Mary Ann. You know? I knew nothing about it. And it came from a home that was very prejudiced. The N-word was used all the time. All the negative stories about people of color were told. So it was part of my makeup and my family and my life. And so I never thought about it as anything. So I got woke when Richie Halverson, a young man from my neighborhood, was taken to Vietnam. And when every month I had to watch my brothers, as the lottery was coming through, pray that their number would not be chosen. And that started to wake me up and to think, my goodness, something's not right here. There's injustice in the world, and I want to know more about this. I also remember going to high school in my sophomore year, and it was the first time I had been around people of color, because I always lived in a white neighborhood and white schools and everything. And there was a black girl sitting next to me in home economics, and I thought, she's really nice. She's really nice, you know. How can people say these things? So that's what started to wake me up and get me curious and start to think things. Mother Teresa was on a train when she got her call. She was going from one elite school to another. She had been a teacher in these elite schools for young men. And she was on the train and she looked out the window and she saw poverty. And she saw sickness. And she saw the poorest of the poor. And she knew in that moment she could never go back to where she was before. She could not teach in these schools. She wanted to work with the poorest of the poor. And people would ask her, how could you touch those people? They're so dirty and they're full of maggots and they're, how could you even be around them? Don't they smell? And she said, every one of them, I see the face of Jesus. Her beloved Jesus was in the face of every person. And so that's how she could care for them and love them. Gandhi, he was a young lawyer. He was on a train also. He was educated. He lived in England. He came to India for, I don't know what, a workshop, conference, something like that. He got on the train and they told him, hey, you can't be on this part of the train. You have to be in the back of the train with all the people of your caste. And he was like, what? And he got off the train. They took him to jail. And that was the beginning of his wokeness. He said, I can't go back to where it was before. I can't not see what's happening to my people here in India. I need to make changes. I need to fight radical injustice in the ways that I can do that. Rosa Parks was on the bus, remember? And they said, move to the back of the bus. And this one time she said, no, I'm not going to the back. And she was arrested and taken to jail. And that's the spark that woke Martin Luther King up. When he realized that she was taken to jail for not bringing to the back of the bus, he said, this is not okay. And so that woke Martin. Rosa woke Martin up. So then I started to think, well, what about Buddha and Jesus and all these people that we know from our history that have done miraculous, wonderful things? And I know you probably know the story of Buddha. He was born in this palace. His father was king. He had all these riches. He had everything he could ever want. Apparently, the story goes that when he was born, a sage came and said to him, to the father, he's either going to be a king and a ruler, or he's going to be a spiritual leader. And the father said, no spiritual leader. So we're going to keep him locked in this little place, palace, and show him nothing to do with spirituality, nothing. And so he never saw the poor, he never saw the sick, he never saw old age. I don't know what they do with their old servants, but they, any of that. So when he was 29, he left the palace. He wanted to see, he started to wake up, he started to get curiosity. There's got to be something else in here. He called his palace a pleasant prison, and he was feeling the confines of this prison, and he went out into the streets and he saw what he could never see, had never seen before. He saw poverty, he saw sickness, he saw death, he saw everything, and he went into a deep, deep, deep depression. He was so depressed. He knew he couldn't go back to his pleasant prison, but he didn't know what to do now, and he didn't know how to alleviate the suffering and take the suffering away. And the story is that he actually started fasting, and one of his friends found him dying by a river and nursed him back to health. And at that point, he went and sat under the Bodhi tree and said, I'm going to sit here until I can understand human suffering, until I can understand how I can help with this. And so he sat there and he went inside and he went into meditation and he went into the spirit and he got nirvana, the enlightenment. But he didn't stay under that tree with nirvana. He went out into village to village and he said, The way to alleviate suffering is through compassion and kindness, by caring for one another, by loving one another. He said, that's how we're going to help people. And so he went from village to village to village. He was a wisdom teacher. He was an activist. He was not a political activist, but he was a social and a spiritual activist. And he went out there and he said, I'm going to teach people. I'm going to teach them through meditation. I'm going to teach them through kindness and compassion and helping one another. That he wandered all over and he did this. And this morning I woke up and I thought, because before he left the prison, he got married and had a son. I thought, whatever happened to his son? And I looked it up. His son actually became one of his disciples and went with him on many a journey and many a trip. They call this engaged Buddhism today. Engaged Buddhism. It integrates spiritual practice with a commitment to social and environmental justice. And so there's so many Buddhists in my church down in South Jersey, and they're really committed to this social justice and social change. He's challenged all the social hierarchies. Instead, and he said that it's not a political activism, it's spiritual activism. So, compassion, kindness, not harming others. Not harming others. My gosh, why is that so difficult? Why is that woke? You know, we all not want to harm others. So then I went to Jesus, and I thought, wow, you know, he was a nice Jewish boy. He grew up, his dad was a carpenter, his mom was probably a housewife. He, you know, could have had a really nice life. What made him decide that, wait a minute, this pleasant prison, this place, it's not working for me. I see what the Romans are doing. I see the social injustice. I see what's going on in my religion, you know, how we judge each other and everything. And some say he got enlightened when he was 12 and he talked the story of him talking to the rabbis. But I think he probably got it when he did that 40 days and 40 nights into the desert. He went in there, and that's the period we're in right now, the 40 days and 40 nights that Jesus went into the desert. He faced his demons. He faced his devil inside. He faced all the parts of him that kept him from being a humanitarian and a loving person. He went from manger to master teacher. And one of the things I noticed about all these people that I've mentioned so far, they all had to go through a period of suffering. They had to go through some kind of breaking open that just took them to another place, that transformed them to another place. Jesus in the desert, you know, Buddha, the depression and the sadness and the heart hurting so badly, Martin going to jail, Rose going to jail, you know, all of that. They all had to face all of the parts of themselves inside of them to keep them from being in compassion. I remember reading this line one time. It says, as soon as I say I love you, everything unlike love is going to present. So as soon as I say I'm a compassionate being, everything unlike parts of me that are not compassionate are going to present. And I have a choice in that moment to look at that and face them honestly, like Jesus did in the desert, like Buddha did under the tree, or I can pretend they're not there and just keep going on. Let me see. I read this book by John Shelby Spong. He talked about Jesus and the non-religious Jesus. And he said that Jesus was a breaker. The breaker of tribal boundaries, the breaker of prejudices and stereotypes, the breaker of religious boundaries. As the breaker of tribal boundaries, The human Jesus began the difficult process of shifting us versus them. That's where we go, us versus them. Thinking about Jews and Gentiles. Gentiles were not okay. They couldn't be in the main part of the synagogue. They had to be outside somewhere. Religious Jews could be inside. As the breaker of prejudice and stereotypes, the human Jesus elevated the status of the Samaritans, the poor, the women, the children, and the ill. The demon-possessed. As the breaker of religious boundaries, the human Jesus communicated and demonstrated that anything which puts limits on humanity, that teaches people to hate, to reject, to violate another, cannot come from God. Can't come from God. So becoming a disciple of Jesus or a disciple of Buddha leads one to decide to walk the ethical way, to wake up, to walk the ethical path, the moral path. I thought at one point, Martin could have gone home after that experience. He could have done nothing. He could have just been a dad and a pastor of his church. Fine. Rosa could have went to the back of the bus. I mean, she probably did it a million times before that. Never complained, just did what she was supposed to do. Gandhi could have went home to England and just continued his life as a lawyer and said whatever. Buddha could have gone back to the palace and been there and lived a wonderful, rich, wealthy life. Jesus, I'm sure there were many of his friends that said, Jesus, stop this, man. You're going to get in trouble. You're going to get crucified. Shut up. Go home. He could have gone home, got married. But then when I started thinking about that, I thought, no, they couldn't. They can't. Once you wake up, how do you go back? How do you go back and keep your spirit and your soul? How do you go back and not have it eat you inside somehow, some way, to make you this bitter, bitter person? And I think we see a lot of politics today. These people who are selling their soul, who see it, who wake up but have to deny it to keep their jobs and to keep their positions and to keep maybe their families safe. Maybe they're really afraid of what can happen to them. So Buddha says compassion, kindness, not wanting to harm others. How do we have compassion for that? So how do you can't go back once you wake up, once you see the truth, once you know that injustice is here. Injustice. I always say, I'm 79, and I say, when I get 80, I'm going to stop. I'm tired of protesting. I'm tired of going. Here we go again. Here we go again. Out there marching. How many marches have we all been on in our lifetime? How many times have we walked on to Washington and done things, But the truth is, you can't stop and you can't go back when you see injustice. So much of what I hear today, especially around the immigrants, is this cry for vengeance. They're taking our homes. They're taking our money. They're taking our insurance. They're voting when they shouldn't. It's almost like we always have to have an enemy. We have to have somebody that we're going to blame for what's going on or what's happening. I remember reading a book when I was in high school called The Lottery. Do you remember that book? It was so disturbing to read that in high school. It was a village where they did a lottery every year. They picked a name out of a hat or something like that. And that person got stoned to death. That person was the scapegoat. That person was responsible for every cow that died, every baby that got sick, every poverty, everything horrible that happened to the village. They were the scapegoat. And it seems like we always need a scapegoat. Someone that we're going to harm, that we're going to stone to death, that we're going to punish, we're going to send away, so that we what? Feel better? I don't know. Feel like, oh, okay, now we can go live our lives, okay, because we got rid of, the person that's responsible for all our pain and suffering. Being a good person means leading with kindness, lifting those who have fallen, and giving light to those who are lost in the dark. It means being a voice for the voiceless, a shelter for the broken, and a quiet example of what love can be. It's allowing others to live freely, choosing compassion, even when the world forgets how, and never wasting your kindness on those who choose cruelty. Stand tall against them, because goodness means having the courage to defend what's right. My ministry today is kindness and compassion, to join others to help create a better world. Most especially because I am a person of both faith and interfaith. I want to be woke like Jesus and Buddha. I want to keep my moral courage. I am still believing, still holding the line for the soul of